the reason I'm showing that is that on the walk to Frenchman's Cap, which was in March before last, David told me about the Dolomites, and I said, can I come too? And he said yes. Now, feel free to say anything if you would like to, David.
Well, Omiro, we arrived at the start of the walk at Dobiaco, and we stayed at this hotel for the night, and then we caught the bus down to Lake, and off we went. So over to you there, Kent.
You'll note the name there, it says Toblach. That was what the Austrians, this used to be part of Austria before the First World War. And this is just a typical sort of scenes. They have these sort of very big houses with little windows, and it's quite ornate. Now, wait, there's more. This is a picture of Peter Collenbecker. I actually stayed in Dobiaco the day before the walk started, and I ate apple strudel at cafes. I ate quite a lot of them. They have very good apple strudel in Austria. However, Peter went on a walk and went around those three quite famous mountains, which, quite frankly, I've forgotten the name of.
Tre Pizzi di Lavaredo. Three peaks of Lavaredo.
Chimney.
Chimney, yes.
And that is another picture of Dobiaco, and you'll note the little Catholic chapel. There's little Catholic shrines and crucifixes all over the place. And I actually went inside that, and it's quite a nice little chapel. But that's the mountain scenery. That is one of Peter's slides, and that's the lake where we drove to and started the walk. This again is one of Peter's pictures, and it's a fairly typical scene on the first day. There's even quite high up, you'll notice there's cows and, you know, eating grass is what cows tend to do. And you'll notice in the foreground there's a cross. There was quite a lot of Catholic type religious symbols here and there. I don't think the people are very necessarily Christian by conviction, but there's a lot of cultural architecture, if I can use that term. And again, you'll see there's a lot of cows dotted around the villages. Now, just feel free to say anything if you want, David.
Yes, certainly. Well, this is usually thought to be one of the more difficult parts of the walk, because we come over through this path here, round the bottom and along this path. But we had two people with us who were from England, and they weren't very keen on doing that up and over and down and across here. So in the end, we came all the way down to the bottom and walked up this way.
Well said. And I'll just, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm zooming in. They're people, so that gives you the scale. So I hope you can see that.
Yep.
Those little specks are people.
Yeah, and that was an Israeli party.
Now that mountain, I believe, is called Mount Marmalade, which I presume, David, must have been named by an Englishman having his breakfast.
Marmalade.
Now, I think we're slightly out of sequence here for some reason, but this is a view from what happened
Langazoi.
yeah, thank you, yes. In the late afternoon, there was often thunderstorms, but we managed to beat the thunderstorms and get to the Huttons or refugios before the storms. But when the storms subsided, you had these cloud formations, and the refugio that David mentioned, Lagazoi, which I'm sure I've mispronounced, was quite high up on the mountains, 2,500 metres or something. And here's another view from Lagazoi. You know, another cross on the top. And that's the morning.
Now, this mountain had been tunnelled through by the Italians so as they could tunnel all the way up to the top and carry up about 35 tons of GNT so they could blow up the Austrians who were sitting on the top. And instead of us walking down the side, we actually got into the tunnel system and walked down through the tunnels. This is a lookout for the soldiers on the top. Now we're starting to go down.
We went along to the top.
Now, this one here, you might not be able to see it, but I'll just zoom in on Zoom. And that's Refugio Novolo, which I'm sure I've mispronounced, David.
Yes, this was built by a gentleman at the beginning of the First World War, and he lived up there. And you can imagine our cry of horror to find we've got to go down through the column and up the other side. However, it was another place with a wonderful view. And in the war, in the First World War, there's lots of stories there that people from this side were talking to that side and saying, well, how's my brother who lives in the Austrian bit, or how's my sister who lives in the Italian bit? Of course, now it's all under Italy.
And I can say we made good time that day, and we had lunch at another place that you can't see below the climb. I think it was called Avenza, something like that. But they had the best food was such good food. Like, there was this pasta dish, and I don't know what it is, but it was a pasta dish filled with this sort of beetroot mixture, which I had. It was sensational, quite frankly. Sure, better than dehydrated, whatever it is in the dehydrated stuff you eat on bushwalking here. These are views from Refugio Novolo, which I'm sure I've mispronounced again. And again, there was a thunderstorm, and so when we're up in Refugio Novolo, and it's interesting that a really, really nice little, comfortable little place. To call them I don't know what you'd call them, a chalet perhaps, but the cloud sort of cleared, and so we were watching the cloud sort of come and go.
The walk
And I,
itself is about 120 kilometres long, and the guidebook says try it in 8 days. We actually had to try it in less to fall in with one another's plans. So behind the couple here, this is Peter and Julie Colenbecker from Launceston, Kent from Gorham, myself from Prospect Vale, and this couple who asked if they could walk with us. They're from England, and they, brother and sister, they grew up in the same county as I did, in Surrey, south of London. So it was lovely catching up. Did you do this at that school and the multi-school functions? We're about to go down this path and then across here and onwards. So nice little view ahead.
and that mountain is Mount Pelmo, and I think that's a bit over 3,000 metres. Most of our walking was, I think, between about 1,500 and a bit over 2,000 metres.
Yes, with the one bit up to 2.7.
2.7.
Yeah.
I can say that maybe it's because of the Austrian connection, but they had the absolute best apple strudels. Like, I've never tasted an apple strudel in Tasmania like it. If you're over there, get the German or Austrian apple strudels. They are fantastic. They also have a pretty, as well as a lot of beer, and I know some of you may not like drinking alcohol, but they also had a drink which they had was 50% apple juice and 50% fizzy water called apple Schlosser. And I had trouble asking for it, so I would go up to the bar or whatever it was and say, "Can I have some apple juicen mit Frissenwasser?" And they nearly all speak very good English, and they said, "Oh, do you mean apple Schlosser or whatever it was called?" So that was quite a good drink. The funny looking mass above the group there is a bit of old sort of icy snow. And all this was about 12 months ago. It was almost 12 months ago to the day we were over there doing all this. And that's the end of the walk. That town is called, I think it was El Gordo. And this is part of Italy.
We had to end the walk one day early because there'd been a heavy thunderstorm somewhere in the area most afternoons, but 2 days before someone had been killed by lightning. And so because heavy storms were forecast again, they decided to close the park and say everyone had to stay where they were for 24 hours so that there was no more suggestions that someone could be killed on the mountains by lightning. So we talked it over, and because of our bookings for aeroplanes, we decided then to walk off the mountains, the 15 kilometres down to here. And Kent quickly resourced when the coach was coming through, or the bus service, down through this village to take us through to Bolzano to spend the night there before going on to the airport at Venice the next day. So please, next slide.
Now this was interesting because David and I, it was a Sunday, and David and I said, well, we ought to go to church. So we found this little evangelical church in Belluno, and much to my surprise, I was just sitting there minding my own business because everyone speaks Italian. I guess it was a bit like being in a Pentecostal church. I couldn't understand what they were saying. But next thing I know, they asked David to say something, and he gave a mini sermon. And I can say that most of the people there smiled and nodded, so I think they liked it. And if you can see up on the wall, I think you can probably guess what that is, and I won't tell you, but I'm expecting you to know what that passage is. It's pretty obvious, really.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father, say, except by myself. No?
And that was a sort of, we all separated and we were wandering around Belluno or somewhere, and we all bumped into each other, and so we had lunch. Now, this is a couple of slides at the end, and don't worry, Dr. Phil, I've nearly finished. But I went to Venice, and this is a very ornate ceiling, and they made these paintings way up in the air, and I thought to myself, why on earth would you stick a painting on a ceiling like that? I just couldn't figure it out, but that's what they did. And that's more of Venice. They had these people putting these carts all over the place. And that's a bit more. And that is the Venice Square. There's people everywhere. And now this is an interesting one. I was in a restaurant, and this is my translation app. And one of the menu item was frittera Mr. con verderine, and the Australian app called it mixed friction with verderine. And I asked the waiter, who spoke very good English, what exactly is mixed friction with verderine? And he said it was calamari and prawns.
I never heard the word Vedorina.